Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Sell More Book Show, episode 546. I'm Brian Cohen from Best Page Forward, joined once again by Cindy Dees, a best-selling thriller and romance author who's also a former spy. We had a lot of fun, Cindy, talking last episode about kind of, in a way, expectations for readers, but also expectations for authors, how they should necessarily expect to learn this process for themselves. I mean, you've seen a lot of authors, you've spoken at a lot of events. This is a struggle for a lot of people figuring out their process, and some of them never get past that. It's really tough to see, like, what do you think these readers, or what do you think these authors need to consider when they're just deciding, I'm going to actually sit down and do this thing?
Well, the first thing you have to figure out when you start writing is how to make time in your life for writing. When I first started, that was super difficult because my life was full. And now I'm having to carve out hours of time to be uninterrupted. And then, secondarily, I don't think people, when they start writing, realize how much time you spend thinking when you're not at your computer, that you carry the books around in your head and you carry problems, plot problems, and character problems around in your head. And it consumes your life. Now, just to add a wrinkle to the discussion about finding your process, I have never had a book of the 120 plus books I've written. Not one of them has come together the same way. And so sometimes an individual book will come at you in a very different way. Sometimes I can sit down and write a chapter a day, and in 20 days, I've got myself a full book. Sometimes I fight for 2 years with a book. And that has been disappointing. I wish there were a formula. I wish there were a magic, put the bread in the toaster, push the button down, wait a certain amount of time, and a book pops out. But that is not how writing works. And so you really do have to learn to listen to your own creativity and your own, how do you feel? Are you awake and energized? Are you interested in the scene you're writing in? Are you excited about what's coming next in your book? If you're not, maybe you're not about to write the thing you should be writing. I mean, you just have to find what I call kind of your key questions and answer those for yourself about how you write and how stories come to you.
I love that. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk more about this, and kind of this will lead itself into our top story of the week in a second here. But there was a question of the week from a couple weeks ago, which was, if you could set a story in your favorite place in the world, where would you set it and why? Randy Landenberger said New Zealand, because everyone there is a character. They have great spirit even when they're mad, great sense of humor, and such a variety of land and seascapes. Roland Denzel said on a Danube cruise, because I'd need to research it. And Bethany Tucker said, I'm so torn about this right now. I'm enjoying writing settings in Chicago, but I adore the landscape of Japan and Western Washington. Cindy, is there anywhere that you've traveled or anywhere that you want to travel that you have not yet represented in your books?
Japan.
Yep,
yeah. Japan. I keep threatening that when my husband retires, I'm taking him on a cruise around Japan. And I hope it happens.
I hope so too. Awesome. Well, let's get into the top story of the week: the power of creative intuition. Knowledge of tropes and craft is important, but growing your intuition will help you know when and how to use them, says Kimono York on janefriedman.com. Quote, intuition is the combination of experience and imagination, says York. Imagination is your unique perspective, your ability to make unexpected connections, to see the world in a way no one else does. Experience is about the depth of your engagement with stories, both as a reader and writer, end quote. According to York, it's about knowing the rules of narrative structures, character arcs, and other elements of a good story well, so that you can break them effectively. York recommends reading widely and deeply, uh, writing regularly, and getting feedback from experts in your genre, studying craft, and allowing your life experiences to feed your creativity. Finally, allow yourself to trust your intuition. Quote, many writers second guess their intuitive choices, but remember, intuition is about pattern recognition happening faster than your conscious mind can process. Just because you can't immediately explain why something feels right doesn't mean it is wrong. So Cindy,
Whew, that's a lot to unpack.
I know, and I thought there was a bad uh, autocorrect here, and I'm right. It's Kimono York. So
Gotcha.
that was, I was like, when I read it, I was like, that is not the author's name. So apologies to Kimbu here. But yes, a lot to unpack. What strikes you first from this?
Well, she basically, I mean, there's like 92 points in there that I'm like, yes, that's right. Yes, that. So, but if we're going to stick on the subject of intuition,
Yes.
that comes with experience writing. That comes with just having put a lot of words on a page and getting to the point. And when I think of intuition in a story, I think of I'm writing along and it just clicks in my head. There's been way too much talking. It's time for something to explode right now. Or there's been a lot of explosions and shooting. It's time for everybody to take a breather and, have some quiet to recover. That for me, it's that sense of the flow of a story. I don't consciously think about anymore because I just now do it deeply intuitively. And so those are the sorts of things when I think of intuition, I think of those decisions of what to do next, decisions of how to make a left turn that's unexpected. Or if I've got a plot that I've been following, yeah, I'm getting bored with it. It's time to make a left turn and do something different. Those I think are what she's talking about. And
Yeah.
yeah, she's absolutely right. 99 times out of 100, if you trust that instinct, it'll take you someplace interesting and creative.
And I'm
What do you think about them? I mean, um, are you somebody who pays a lot of attention to intuition when you write?
definitely. I mean, former improv comedian here, kind of
Yeah.
ran my whole life on intuition for quite some time. I used to have an inner monologue. I crushed that sucker with improv. But yeah, I think that one of the interesting things about this, you brought up the experience feeds the intuition. What I notice a lot is a lot of authors using their intuition from before they became writers
Mm,
in their writing and in their marketing and sometimes that intuition is extremely risk averse
yeah.
and they're terrified.
Yeah.
They think that no, that must be wrong, or no, that must be wrong from the writing or the marketing perspective, and so it holds them back in a significant way. And so I
Interesting.
love that you brought up that experience kind of needs to happen in a way first in order to know, and obviously Kimbu brought this up too, that you need that experience, you need to know the rules, and that helps you develop your intuition. I think if you trust your intuition right from the get-go as a writer, it might make your story and your career smaller.
Yeah. Mary Jo Putney, who wrote a long time ago and still writes occasionally and is one of the smartest authors I've ever heard talk about writing. She made the comment that when you first start writing, you open the veins closest to the surface of your skin to bleed onto the page because
Mm,
they're easy. They're the easy stories for you to tell. They're the stories you know the best and they're the most straightforward. And the more experienced you get as a writer, the deeper you have to dig in your arm to find the vein to open up to
mm,
bleed onto the page to write the story. And, she's talking in a metaphor, but I really do believe what she's talking about is you need to learn the craft, you need to learn the narrative structures that Kimbo's talking about, and do that by telling the easy, straightforward, follow the rules stories first. And once you're comfortable with that, and you may or may not ever publish any of those stories that you write, but once you've written some of those stories to where you're comfortable with that structure, then you can go ahead and take the risks, and then you can try new things. And you won't go so far afield that you lose that story structure, that beginning, middle, and end that your readers expect. Um, and that's I mean, that's why I write the trope books, is to say, here is the rule of that particular narrative structure. Um, so that you don't have to write it and learn it for yourself before you can break it.
Yeah, I love that metaphor about the veins. Do you think that that's really the process for improving the imagination side of things
Bleeding.
too?
Well, I would like to
Is
think you don't have to literally bleed, but
no.
yes.
The metaphorical bloodletting, not the
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know when I get stale in my writing, if I look at my life, I haven't done anything outside of writing for a while. That's when my writing gets
mm,
stale. And there's no way around it. People use analogies. Oh, you have to, have to feed the well. You have to, you have to feed your creativity. They're not wrong, and you can say it in any flowery language you like. But if you sit in four walls staring at them day in and day out, your writing will get stale and it will get old, and you will have written about all the interesting things you've ever done or seen or thought or felt. And you have to keep experiencing new things to have new things to write about.
yeah, and to that effect, I mean, when it comes to improving your intuition side,
Right.
I
Right.
think that authors need to move more. It's not even just about
Mm.
experiencing, it's about getting the blood pumping. It's kind of an odd answer to these kind of things, but it's like if you exercise, if you move your body, if you work your muscles, the blood is gonna make it to your brain too. And that is going to probably improve the imagination side as well as the intuition. If you can't solve a problem, go for a walk.
I actually set a timer, and I've heard studies say work for 30 minutes and then get up and walk for 5 is shows the best improvements in productivity, but I find that cuts my creative flow a little too much.
Right.
So I set timers for an hour. I write for 1 hour, and then the alarm goes off and I get up. And I live in Texas, and it's 1,000 degrees in the summer. And so in the summer, I walk on a treadmill
Yeah.
in the house where it's, human temperatures out and I'm not going to melt. But I'll go walk on the treadmill for about 10 to 15 minutes. And I do not think about my book. That's the other thing. When you're talking about
Mm,
intuition, I actually will watch podcasts like yours. I will watch master classes. I'll watch anything but m- something that pertains to my own work for that 15 minutes. And and even if I'm mad when the alarm goes off of, wait a minute, I was really in the flow, I know it came next. If I get up and move away from the computer and come back, whatever I do next is always better. And it makes me mad every time. And I'm like, darn it, I have to keep exercising. But I'll do that 5 or 6 times in a day. I'll write for an hour and then go walk for 10 or 15 minutes. And by the way, I've gotten a bunch of steps in, and we call it cozy cardio in our house, because walking for 10 minutes isn't going to kill anybody. And it doesn't feel like I've had a big workout, but by breaking it up into lots of little pieces like that, I get a lot of exercise in without, feeling like, oh, I've got to go sweat and work. And, I resist exercising. So, um, but then that leads to the question of what are the things you do to feed your brain while you're walking or you're away from your computer? Because I think it's a two-pronged thing. I think exercise is one, but I also think you have to feed your brain. You have to feed life into your brain. And so I'm curious, what do you do to feed life in the world into your brain?
absolutely. I've really enjoyed reading a lot of different authors, different genres.
Mm,
I really have enjoyed podcasts as well. I'll listen to entrepreneurial ones. I have an entrepreneurial bent to me. Those of
yeah,
you who watch the show frequently know this
know
quite
that.
well about me. Um, but I like listening to health things too. I like hearing a lot about like what's the cutting edge of what people are doing in sports and exercise science. And so those are some of the things that fill my brain in an interesting way that kind of keep me going and growing.
Cool. That's
Yeah.
super interesting. I've spent a long time teaching my students you don't have to write about what you know. You
Mm,
only have to write about what you can research properly or what
I
you can
like that.
imagine plausibly. But that said, if I can stand in the place that I'm going to be writing about, I do find that that helps because there are just sensory things and little details that you notice um, that you might not otherwise notice. You notice what a place smells like. You
Yeah.
might notice a particular sound that's unique to that area that you wouldn't notice if you were watching a YouTube video or TV show. They're going to edit it out. Um, or some quirk that the locals have in behavior, what time of day
Mm-hmm.
they all strip down into their awful red speedos and jump out into the ocean and then sit in the ocean and chat with their beer bellied neighbors.
Right.
um, there's just details like that that actually getting to experience are very difficult to replicate. And, I've had people say, yes, but I live in central Indiana. And, no aspersions to central Indiana. Indianapolis is a great town. Um, but any place is interesting if you go there and stand on the dirt and then just open your senses to it and, listen to it. Look at the birds that are flying over and, are there airplanes going past? What's the weather like? I mean, there's just so many things that you can absorb that you can then bring to your writing that,
I love
uh,
that.
but you can't do that sitting at your computer.
Yeah. I have been to Central Indiana. There's a couple of interesting places in there, but I agree with you. Um,
Well, I'm from Michigan, so I mean, you kind of
Same
have to
here.
pick on Ohio and Indiana just out of general principle.
Of
So I
course.
apologize.
Of course.
Somebody
No,
can feel
it's
free to pick on Michigan for me if they'd like.
no. We don't have to today. We're the ones in charge. We get to decide who gets picked on. Um, so we're ready for the lightning round. Would you like to give another lightning sound to the fun?
Sure, I gave close thunder last time, lightning last time. Let me see if I can do a distant one this time. It's kind of a. That's about the best I
Ooh,
can do with
I like the way
thunder.
that faded away at the end. So Cindy, you've written novels, over 120 novels for many years. How do you keep it feeling fresh for yourself?
Ooh, um, well, I don't write a story unless I think it's super interesting to me. If I'm not interested in it, how can I possibly make it interesting to a reader? And
Yeah.
then I challenge myself. From time to time, I'll try to do new things in my writing. I'll see a writer do something and think, golly, I wonder if I could pull that off in a story. And so, like, I have been for the last week fighting with about a 10-page scene. And I'm somebody who writes 20 pages a day. So to spend a week fighting with a single 10-page scene is really unusual for me. But
Yeah.
I've got a current time moment happening and I've got a backstory moment happening, and I'm bouncing back and forth between the two. And I'm bouncing about once a page. I'm going to the other scene. But what's been really fascinating is using sensory moments to trigger the flip from one scene to the next. So, dusk is falling at the end of the first scene. It's dusk when we go to the first backstory scene. In one of the current day scenes, somebody says, I smell blood. And then in the next scene, there's a fight happening and she smells blood within a paragraph or so into that fight of can I successfully bounce about 10 times using sensory inputs to go from one to the next. It's been a fascinating exercise in learning scene transitions. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of scene transitions in my life, but I've never tried this. And
Hmm.
wow, it's been challenging and interesting. And so that's what keeps me excited as a writer, is always finding something new to make my writing better. Because I think if you're not getting better as a writer, you're sliding backwards. You're not static as a
Mm,
writer. You're either moving ahead or sliding back. That's the only option.
that
So I
totally
try
makes
to
sense.
continuously move ahead.
I love that. It's the 10,000 hours rule. It wasn't about
Yeah.
10,000 hours of doing the same thing. It's about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice at the edge of your comfort zone. And it
Yes.
sounds
I
like
mean,
you're
what do you
doing it.
do? What do you do to keep it fresh and, keep it new and unique and interesting?
I think for me, it is about setting bigger goals. It is about,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
have to, if I definitely start to roll back if I don't like keep the foot on the gas pedal, if I
Yeah.
don't keep pushing towards something interesting. I was stuck for a couple of years with some things, and I really only tried sideways little changes here and there rather than trying anything big. And I will tell you, getting
Mm.
coaches to needle me and tell me, all right, Brian, you're not really doing this. What are you going to do different? That's been a huge difference for
Were
me.
you risk averse, or do you, I mean, again, for your audience, kind of what do you think was the motivation behind that they can look for in themselves?
I think I was honestly nervous about changing. I didn't want people to look at me in a different way,
Mm.
but I also realized that any version of ourselves that people see us as, you don't get to control that anyway.
No.
So you might as well be open to making changes with it.
Yeah. That's why I picked up a pen name.
Yeah.
It was during the pandemic, and I was just bored and wanted to
Mm-hmm.
try something different. And that seemed like a good moment to try something different. And my literary agent was wise and said, "Hey, you've written about 100 books." And that's when lots of authors burn out and never write another book.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than do that, I would love to see you write. And she challenged me to write 3 projects that were nothing like anything I'd ever written before. And um, and she said, "We're not going to try to publish them. Publishing is shut down. Don't worry about it. Just, I want you to do 3 things that you've maybe thought about doing and were afraid of, or thought were so different, they were so off brand, you couldn't do them, or, are just fun things for you."
Yeah.
And, and so I wrote a book about a middle-aged heroine, which is sold to Netflix. I wrote a book. It was a time travel, paranormal, suspensey, Templars, Scottish thing
Yep.
that's every genre under the sun. And it's still my favorite book I've ever written. And in fact, I'm getting ready to publish it. I wrote a second one. It seemed like a book that needed a second one, or
Nice.
people would go, "What the heck? What fever dream was she in when she wrote
Uh,
this?" And I am going to publish it, and we'll see what happens with it. And then I wrote a clean and wholesome romance, which was completely off brand for me. Did it under a pen name, and lo and behold, those things have taken off. And I've found this whole new audience of readers that would have never touched my, violent, sexy, you know, mainstream fiction.
right.
And I find it a wonderful palate cleanser. But it all came out of the idea of trying something completely off the wall.
Yeah.
And it really refreshed me. I find myself as excited about writing now as I was when I started my career. And not many authors as far into their careers as me can say that. But I really think it came from giving myself permission to do something super different. So yay for you for jumping off that cliff,
Thank you. Same to
because
you.
it's hard. Yeah,
We've all
it's
had a
hard.
few cliffs. Yeah. One clip for you that was really interesting, based on your friend daring you essentially, was writing these stellar books on tropes, including the Tropeaholics Guide to External
Yep.
Romance Tropes. Um, beyond the bet,
Yes.
beyond being compelled to do it, what made you excited to actually write these books on tropes?
Um, well, it's a topic that not many people knew much about. And the more I dug into it, the more fundamental it is to the storytelling process. And so it struck me as an area that authors are really undereducated about. And there was not only room to write books and maybe, make a little money at it, which is always lovely, let the record show. Um, but then I find that I learn most of what I know about writing by teaching.
Yep.
And so with the pandemic going, there wasn't any opportunity to teach. So I could write a book, and it felt like I was teaching, an audience of writers. And I learned a lot more about tropes by really digging into them. And I do have to tell you, so I've I've got 4 books written. I did 3 on romance tropes, and then I stopped for a minute and did the first book on thriller tropes, which is
Yep.
published. And it's, I don't know, 550 pages long. And then I went back and am almost done. Just within a few weeks, I'll be done on the 4th book on romance tropes. And then I've got 3 more romance books and 7 more thriller trope books to write. And I've got a bunch of mystery tropes to write, sci-fi and fantasy tropes to write. And it just kind of exploded on me into this giant project of understanding story structure. And I'm fascinated by it, that here are these, they're basically the skeletons of every story that we all tell. And once you wrap your brain around them, you can flesh out those skeletons however you like. And it's why everybody on Earth looks different, but we all have fairly similar skeletons beneath our skin.
Yeah.
And I just found it super interesting to strip it all away to these fundamental core story patterns. And nobody had ever done it before. And I was like, you know what? I can make this a lot easier for a lot of other writers. And so I structured the book by a working writer for working writers, not just to understand them, because that's very academic. It's like, how do we use these? And so I have, multi-page lists of things to think about when you're writing a trope, or traps that trope can fall into, or tropes that are similar to that one, but not quite the same, or, examples of books and movies, the more I dug into it, the more interesting it became. And the last piece that I added to all of the trope books is, why do readers love this trope? And that question really blew my mind when I started thinking about it with the various story structures. What is it that draws readers to this particular story? Because as soon as I know the answer to that, then I know what to deliver to readers, not only to meet their expectations, but to make sure they love it. And I have found it's really changed how I approach writing, to think about that notion of, well, what is the reader like about this? What's the reader going to love, and what's the reader going to respond to? And am I doing enough of that?
I love that. That's
So,
great.
when you talk about expectations, that's kind of the core of what I ask myself is, what does this reader want out of this story structure? And am I delivering it? And I don't think enough writers think about that. So
Yeah. Well, they
it's my
can read
bully
your
pulpit
books.
for thinking about
Yeah.
these things.
They can
So,
go to
yeah,
cindydees.com. They can read the Tropeaholic books. There are the 4, and then there are many more coming. So definitely go check
anymore.
those out.
I'll be
We're
doing these
gonna.
boogers for the rest of my life. I think I've got, like, I don't know, 30 of them lined up to write eventually.
That's
And I
exciting.
just started collecting the tropes of melodrama, which are like soap opera tropes. And I'm like, darn it, that's going to be a whole nother book.
Oh,
I didn't
that's so
need
funny.
another book. And here we
Come
go.
on, come on. They keep pulling
So,
me back in.
oh, it sucks.
We need a
Well,
question of the week. We're gonna cut to the question of the week because I find myself a little short on time personally. But what do you want to ask? You asked such a great question last week. What is the deep thought you want to inspire in our listeners today? I know the Jeopardy music plays.
what's the thing that you have wished you could do in a book that you've been afraid to try, and why are you afraid to try it? And the follow-up question is, what have you got to lose by giving it a go? Because I
I
think as
love that.
writers, we psych ourselves out of trying big things that we're not sure that we can handle, or tackling a topic that's maybe so intense to us personally. Maybe it's a painful topic, or it's a difficult topic. And it's like, so what's that thing that you're afraid of trying?
I love that. That is awesome. Y'all, you can answer Cindy's great question at the Sell More Book Show After Party Facebook group, or at sellmorebookshow.com. Cindy, it has been a delight getting to tap into some of your wisdom from all that you've written, all that you've done, and I really appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Well, I've really enjoyed hearing you talk about your writing too. Thank you for sharing that with me. I get a kick out of hearing what other authors find works for them. So,
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad to hear it. Awesome. Well, definitely go check out Cindy's stuff, including the Tropeaholic books, at cindydees.com, and the tropes specifically are cindydees.com/tropes. I really I'm really excited to see when all these Tropes books come out. And I'm really excited, we'll knock on wood here for when you get your announcement for your Netflix series.
You bet. I will hopefully you're the thing that makes it happen.
I'm so excited. I think so. I think it's going to happen. Awesome, folks. Well, we'll have another guest co-host next week. For Cindy, I'm Brian. Have a great week of book selling, everybody. And we will talk to you soon for the very next episode 547. So bye,
Wow.
everybody.
Bye.